I think a couple of us wanted to talk about the Miami Marlins. The Marlins right now have a wild card spot. Could be surprising to some. Here's an interesting angle. They are minus 135 favorites to miss, even though they have a wild card spot. Why? Because they've been lucky. +7. +7 in luck factor. 17-5 this year in one-run games. I'm going to guess that that's not going to continue for the entire season here. What do we make of Miami? Not a bet that I would make at minus 135, but that's a team that I look at and when trying to handicap the NL wildcard picture, I think somebody's going to take that spot.
I disagree. I think the Marlins can very much win the postseason or very much make the postseason. And, as much as I love and believe in run differential, you do have examples year after year of ball clubs that go against that. The Mariners made fun differential a thing, and I think the Marlins will probably do that this year. I mean, keep in mind, too, that the Marlins have had great pitching, and it's not Sandy Alcantara doing it. It's just about everybody else. Marlins have the third highest xWOBA allowed, or third best xWOBA allowed in terms of their pitching, fifth fewest hard hit rate allowed. And they're doing it with pitchers we weren't expecting to be good. And then the pitchers we did expect to be good haven't been so far. And so this may be one of those deals where, okay, maybe some guys come back down to reality, but then the others get to enjoy positive regression. And to me, if you have your quote unquote backups sort of leading the charge, then okay, how about your ace, finally stepping up? If that happens, then the Marlins will be just as successful as they were to start the season. The Rangers may clinch the division. The Angels are certainly formidable. Maybe not so much the Mariners anymore, but that is a really tough league with which to clinch a wild card berth in. And if you're not winning that division in the American League West, then you are subjecting yourself to potential harm. And that could very well happen to the Astros. So is it possible that maybe there is some value out there and saying, you know what? And, we'll talk about other ball clubs later, but as I'm looking at the latest odds for Houston, their playoff odds to make the playoffs, yes is at minus 350, no is at plus 290. I think a lot of that is clutching onto our priors, but is there perhaps value in saying, no, the Astros will not be a part of the postseason?
Yeah, no, that's going to be an interesting part of the conversation. Look, where we are in the year right now, what are we, about 70-some games for a lot of teams? There are two divisions that have a win probability over at Fangraphs above 75%, two of them. I think that's pretty good. None of them have more than 5. As great of a start as Tampa had, they're in an awesome division, so they have a 5-game lead. And then, we've got one that's 1 game. We've got a couple that are sitting at 3.5. All these are up for grabs, and I don't know how much all of that is going to change in a month when we're all about the trade deadline. So, I think there are a small group of teams where you can say right now, no, they're out, they're done. It is very small. 24 teams have at least a 9% chance of making the playoffs right now. So that's going to be the interesting part moving forward, that even some of these teams that you may not look at as title contenders, they're in awful divisions. So there is that path.
Yeah, this is definitely the toughest pitching that Virginia's faced, because they had Duke in the Super, they had Army, ECU, and Oklahoma in Charlottesville Regional. Florida is for sure the toughest team that they've faced, 1,000%.
What about all year? Because, we're talking about
ACC teams.
Right.
Yeah, right. Best batting average. They're 6th in on base in the country. They got 6 hitters that had hit 330, had a 430 on base. They can hit. So it's Jake, I'm guessing that based on what you're saying, you're rolling with the pitching, that in this format at this stage, you're going to bet on pitching over hitting. And if you're someone that bets on hitting over pitching, that you think can get hot here and get to some elite starters, that you'd be siding with Virginia, right?
Yeah, I mean, and Aaron's right. Virginia is a well-rounded team, but it's also, for me, like, recent form. Like, part of it is just Florida's pitching looked so dominant in the Super Regional and in their regional in the first round too, whereas Virginia, like I said, kind of struggled with Duke. Like, and Duke was a hot team; they were playing well, but they made it closer than I think we thought Virginia was going to have. They made it a tougher test for Virginia than we thought going into that round, specifically with Duke. And Florida had a tougher opponent in South Carolina, a team that was at one point top 3 in the country, and a couple months ago. And I just really like what Florida has done and how they've stepped up more so than Virginia is kind of playing at the level that we thought they were going to play to. It feels like Florida has found a new level or a new gear, so to speak.
You need the current or former MVP to have a great shot at winning a championship. And history tells us 85% of the time that's the case, right? You have the current or a former MVP on your roster winning the title 85% of the time. The last time it happened without an MVP was 2019. Before that, we have to go all the way back to 2004. Before 2004, it was 1990, the last time a champion did not have an MVP on the team. So in the East, that includes Philly and Milwaukee. And in the West, of course, Denver, Golden State, Phoenix. I don't know. Do we want to count the Lakers with this version of LeBron? I guess we could. It would fit this. It would fit this mold, but it's not a deep list, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically what we're talking about is this idea that, okay, for an NBA champion not to have a current or former MVP on the roster, you're only looking at, say, 15% of instances in NBA history. And oftentimes these are massive upsets. Go back to 2019. That's when the Raptors knocked off the Warriors. Well, guess what? Golden State got really, really injured in the finals. They were without key pieces. And had they been fully healthy, maybe that turns out differently. But for the most part, if you have a current or former MVP on your roster, then you are in a much, much better position to win the NBA championship. So I looked up the MVPs that are still playing. And you've got Joel Embiid with the Sixers, Jokic, obviously, Giannis, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, question mark, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, and LeBron James. So let's take out James Harden and Russell Westbrook because I think they're in a different classification as the others. So Embiid, Jokic, Giannis, Curry, Durant, James. 6 guys, 6, current former MVPs, that category. And to me, if you just bet on those 6 teams, and you have to reallocate units and things like that, like you can't just bet one unit on each one because you're not going to make a profit, if any of them win. But if you sort of allocate your units properly to where perhaps you lay a little more on those with shorter odds, like the Denver Nuggets or the Milwaukee Bucks, then you can make a profit if any of them hit. And that's what it's all about, right? So yes, there are teams that perhaps could still win the NBA championship without an MVP, like the Boston Celtics. I don't think we'd be surprised if the Celtics won next season. But that would probably mean that Jason Tatum is having an MVP season. And do we think he will next year? It's possible, but it's not likely.